Thank you so very much. My name is Maciej Bukowski. I'm a non-resident fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, a US think tank. What a pleasure today to be here with you to speak about a topic that is as mind-boggling as it is real: quantum, space, tech, and money in all this. So we have quite a group in here, and this is going to be a good journey for the next hour or so. Justin Fanelli, the CTO of the US Navy, joining us here. Anna Burzykowska, the head of the Copernicus Innovation Office, should I say? Sure, office at the European Space Agency. And now the three voices of the empowered generation of entrepreneurs in the space satellite industry in Poland. First of all, Grzegorz Brona, CEO of Creotech.
Hello.
David Kuchta.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yep. And Rafał Modrzewski.
Yes,
Apologies.
hello.
Yeah. Mikołaj and ISI. Wonderful. Well, there's so much actually so many angles we could take to delve into this, but I think, perhaps to lay the background a little bit and set the stage, I think we should first of all define the terms of engagement for the next hour or so and explain the basic terms. And I think Grzegorz might have quite a bit to say in that regard, not least because his firm, let's make this the starting point, his firm secured contracts in just December, under which Poland is going to acquire a system that finally gives us visibility, not least on the battlefield. It gives us proper national capacities in this regard. We'd like to hear from you about that as well, but I think above all, it sort of is one of the key lessons from what has been going on in the hell in the East for the last 3 years or so in the war in Ukraine. That to see the battlefield is the utmost capacity that a nation has to have these days in order to be prepared for the worst. So, what's your take?
All right, so thank you a lot for having me here at Davos conference. I guess for the battlefield, Rafał will have a larger insight. So I will focus a little bit on the quantum technologies and space, how to combine both. Well, basically, when we talk about quantum, it's a quite complex ecosystem of technologies, solutions, and markets. From one side, of course, we have quantum computers, the technology that much faster and much better can digest a lot of data and solve complex computational problems in several domains, like drug discoveries, biology, chemistry, optimizing financial market, etc., etc., etc. And when I'm talking faster, I mean not 2 or 10 times faster. I mean billions and billions and billions times faster. And each of these domains are actually now being considered a sweet spot for tech investors. Quantum computing actually will bring in 10 or 15 years from now a revolution to these domains. Then we have something a little bit different, so-called hybrid computing. Hybrid computing is a connection between quantum computing, smaller quantum computers, and standard electronics, standard CPUs. With this technology, I think we are like 5 years, we still have 5 years time to have it at a certain level that could be used in business. But with this technology, you can build networks, mesh networks, the distributed networks, etc. And so you may build, we call it in a fancy way, a quantum internet. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's a quantum key distribution technology, which is used for secure telecommunications, secure communication. It's actually a solution that enhances the secure communication. For those who do not know what QKD actually is, it's not a way to secure the communication itself, but it's a way to distribute a key that will be used then for the encryption of the communication in a safe way. Key distribution quantum key distribution technology is actually pretty mature. All the bits and pieces of the technology are with us. We need a fiber network, optical fiber network. We need some transceivers, receivers, which are being now prepared. We need also time synchronization system, which is now also quite mature. The goal is now to miniaturize the whole solution and prepare the final market product. And then, of course, we have satellites. So if you would like to transfer a key from, let's say, Madrid, Spain to Warsaw, Poland, you are not using standard on-the-ground grid. You use a satellite link. So for satellites, you need also certain technologies like miniaturized lasers technologies, miniaturized receivers on the satellites. And also satellites should, rotate quite quickly in space, pointing and targeting a given point on Earth where the ground station is located. Also in this domain, we have all the bits and pieces now. This time, to put it all together and make it flying in space. So in summary, while we have different technologies, computers, quantum computers, which are not mature, they will be mature in 10 years from now. We have quantum key distribution technologies. Both are I would say future technologies and next things to happen in technology, at least around 2030. So this is the background of the technology.
Lovely. This is setting the stage indeed, the one I was hoping for. I remember having spoken to the scientist some years ago, quite knowledgeable about quantum, and he said that the running joke is that for quantum is like with nuclear fission. It's coming, but it's always 40 years ahead of time. But hopefully this is what you say, this kind of pretends as if the technology is going to be with us much quicker than that. Justin, over to you. With the perspective you have and working for one, I would say, the leading entities in the world that are invested in cutting-edge research, including on quantum, there are certain things I'm sure that we are not even aware of because of the nitty-gritty knowledge that you must have as someone who sees things from a different perspective, not only institutional, but the Navy is also about innovation and ingenuity and making technologies that perhaps are indeed of dual use, because first they serve a military purpose or a security purpose, but then at some point they reach the market. So what would you say are the big themes of today?
Yeah, so the public-private partnerships and the funding from a number of different places to allow this portfolio or set of capabilities to mature. It's an interesting time. You brought up the analogy or the kind of story, the analog that people always say it's the next. When I was at DARPA, we talked about AI that way. So the head of the I2O office, but the computer science office said AGI is coming when the next director comes, and that was the running for 8 directors in a row, right? And so there are summers and winters. AI obviously has been talked about and around for a long time, but we've seen a swoop in that, and I think one of the things that everyone learned from that is it's nice to be ready before the rush. And so in general here, what we say, certainly with my Georgetown hat, is it's good to have the network ready before you need it. And so specifically on quantum, the idea of investments across different countries and across different companies, we call that Horizon 3. And so we are approaching this I'm approaching this from an investment horizon perspective, which is to say that there are still some aspects of this that are more art than science. If you yell at your flowers to grow, they don't go any faster. But if you water them, some come up and some really flourish and then some die off, right? And so this funnel approach is a little bit less what we say in software is waterfall or like straight sequential, and more here's what PsiQuantum is doing in Australia. Let's watch that. Let's look for opportunities to leverage that. Here are the investments in the at University of Chicago for the quantum internet. Here are some projects at DARPA for robust quantum sensors and alternative PNT and GPS. And so as those mature, we have projections or some speculations on when they'll come of age. But like we've seen with any major capability, especially that integrate, sometimes you find a killer app and then a lot of money comes and then you surge. And so we call that Horizon 2. So we are looking for opportunities increasingly in piloting surge, structured, rapid pilots to pull things forward. It's not a quantum technology, but quantum resistant capabilities within cyber are increasingly important. So we put that into congressional language, legislative language, and then we are activating some more projects there. You see investment, and investment, unless it's a dead end, often allows that to grow. And so as we're thinking about this more systematically and we're aligning those activities, the interesting part for a business hub would be that there are national security and economic prosperity implications. And if you're measuring the right things, then there are win-wins available, especially if you're thinking about that with a lot of data, the ability to align some of those investments and activities so that that both are flourishing. It allows a lot more, if not granular control, the ability to steer from a measuring perspective.
Lovely. Yeah. I think this kind of allows us for a smooth transition to a more technical topic, perhaps, but one that is very much part of the discussion here today. Satellites, you both mentioned the words, the key element of the discussion today for all of us, I assume. Anna, the agency that you're part of is the one that is meant to give you a bias, which is, I think, all the more important these days, given that as far as I know, we have very much relied on US technology and US providers, right? Whereas now, not least because of what has just happened this very Monday with the old new president taking over again and the possible severance on anyhow engagement of links between Europe and US, we should probably, for that reason alone already, double down on building our own capacity. So as someone who is both, I guess, as the institution that you work at, pulling some of the strings of the purse, because ESA is also funding projects, right? We, like gentlemen present here, some of your companies, as I know, have benefited from ESA, and that's great. But then at the same time, how do you see this, advancing in the months, years to come?
All right, thank you very much. And I would start with challenging your premise because, in fact, there are sectors in European technology landscapes where we don't rely on American technology, and in fact, we have surpassed the American technology providers due to the fact that Europe has strategically invested in those technology sectors. And one of those fields of investments and fields of technological development is satellite Earth observation, which I work on and which the Copernicus program truly represents. So in the past 15 to 20 years, Europe, on the level of the European Union, has decided that Europe requires the technological sovereignty in Earth observation, and thus the Copernicus program has been created. And that, in fact, then was a very foundation for development of the commercial space sector in Europe that companies like ICEYE or Crotec represent. Now, was that an important decision? I would say yes. Do we have many important decisions to take in the future that would lead us to this kind of outcome? Definitely yes. And one of those decisions will not maybe necessarily rely on development of satellite technology, but in fact on the enabling technologies that would allow to unlock the value coming from these sorts of data sets. And that technology is artificial intelligence and maybe further down the line quantum computing as well. And I think that is a big challenge in Europe to keep capitalizing of their own investments, but also recognize where the niche exists in order for us to repeat the success and be able to continuously leading in Earth observation globally.
Mm-hmm. That's some encouragement, I would say. Wonderful. Well, perhaps to continue on the same thread for a bit longer, Rafa, to you. I mean, your company, one of the, if not the biggest name in the market these days in Europe, also have fantastic example of international, inter-European at the same time, economic cooperation, a Polish-Finnish company. And as far as I know, some of your solutions have proven their worth in situations where technology perhaps was missing before, but now they have really been helping, for instance, during even the floods in Poland last year, right? So capacities that are now being discovered and being proliferated and acquired by different actors who need them seems like a great market opportunity, right? So this is one, but then too, there's also still the dual use components and the thing about how do we actually make sure that the technologies we employ allowed us to have the best of both worlds.
Right. So I think I will try to comment on this sort of one by one. It actually turns out quite interestingly that using the commercial satellite technologies for things like natural catastrophes it's a challenging market opportunity. It sounds like a fantastic one given the climate change and everything that we see around, but I like that the fact that Justin mentioned it's nice to be ready before the rush. Not too many people really think that way. If you really consider how many governments do make investments ahead of time in order to create capabilities to actually be ready when the worst come to happen, that's not very common. And if the governments don't do it, the insurance companies and other companies don't do it either, right? I have to say, what Anna mentioned over here is indeed a critical element in what has happened in the history of European space. It was actually a unique moment in the European space history where the European Commission, jointly with European Space Agency, has decided we do want to be ready ahead of time. Let's create the Copernicus program. Let's create a program that's going to generate all that Earth observation data. And indeed, that has propelled us ahead of the United States in certain aspects. Now, the interesting thing about this, when it was created, it was actually meant to be mainly a civil program. And that's how it has been designed, right? And I think what indeed we have observed over the last 2 to 3 years, and especially over the last 2 years with the war in Ukraine, is that duality of the use of technology and how the satellites themselves must adapt, and the companies, how they build the satellites, how they must adapt those technologies in order to fulfill the needs that are completely new, right? So when it comes to Copernicus, we have designed this system in order to map the entire globe and do it on a semi-regular basis. And depending on the area, we pass over that area every few days or sometimes every week, and that's okay. And we map the entire globe. But when it comes to operations on the battlefield, and I'm sure Justin can comment on that, you really want to be much closer to an operational or tactical decision-making domain, which means you want to be able to respond to what's happening within 1 hour, 2 hours, sometimes something like 30 minutes. And here I have to say, globally speaking, we were not ready before the rush. So when the war in Ukraine has started, we did not have satellite capabilities that would allow us to make those decisions. And funnily enough, it was a little bit of an incidental situation. A company like ours that was originally intending to use the satellite technology to monitor ice on a frequent basis came to aid, right? So the US government literally picked up the phone and called over and said, like, look, guys, you have the largest constellation of small satellites. Why don't you help us take pictures of the 2 highways that lead over to Kiev so we actually know which directions the tanks are coming from? And the reason partially for this, and I'm sure Justin will be able to comment on this, is that most of the prior conflicts were conflicts of air superiority, which means you were able to have a drone hover over an area, a continuous feed of data was happening, right? Now with the Russia-Ukrainian situation, that's not the case anymore. You can't deploy Air Force in order to gather this information. And as such, you have to rely on different things. And so what happened is we have actually globally realized that the future conflicts will majorly depend on space-based technology. And I think you guys all see it, that the countries, the same way as once we've discovered planes and they started building air forces, now we've really discovered that space is not just going to be used as Copernicus, but is really going to be used as something which is a vital element of our national security. And companies like myself or Gregor's companies like Cryotech, so like ICER or Cryotech, are necessary companies right now in Europe to grow very quickly in order to fill that void. Because what's interesting is we are realizing in Europe, and actually in the United States too, that if we want to build a lot of small satellites fast, there aren't really those capabilities in existence, right? So we are working sort of to catch up with that need right now. And I think that we are doing well in Europe, but there is so much more to be done.
Yeah, sure. before I give it over to David, Justin, since you were called out, any immediate
Few times.
Any
immediate comments with regard to
Sure. So this ties in pretty closely with the idea of like portfolio thinking, not this time on quantum, but where do we get this from? So when we think about resilience, something that I try and frame for our extended community is cybersecurity has been a cost driver for a long time. If you think about security as just a way to get more secure, you can spend almost infinitely. If you think about it as a function of resilience, the way that disruptive capabilities like space have brought to the table, and you're thinking about, hey, where do I, to your good point, move the needle, then it becomes more of a value discussion. So if we can look across the offerings and say, hey, this is something that's global or national intelligence, this is something that's more local or tactical, when would I switch? We're in Switzerland, so the idea of a Swiss Army knife and using the right tool for the right thing is something that we should all keep top of mind. And technologies mature at different speeds. And so in this particular case, like the unleashing the public-private partnership, Starlink was ready before any sort of national capability was in some of those cases. And for that reason, we adapted a number of places and are using that originally commercial technology for military applications that we didn't originally foresee. And so part of it is kind of being open-minded and making decisions based on needle movement.
Gotcha. David, 5G, 6G, non-terrestrial networks, NTNs. It took me a moment to actually decipher the whole thing. MPN, mobile private networks, and I assume a bunch of other technologies that your company is working on. What's your take?
Yeah, so we are providing at the moment terrestrial 5G millimeter wave systems. However, all the telco at the moment is looking at the space as a big opportunity to scale up. Because the big problem of telco, especially big as MNOs, was that they are limited to certain geographic, like Germany, Poland, or US. And some of them are big corporates that want to scale globally and scale their services, not only to B2C customers, but also to B2B, also B2G, like governments and dual use. And telco is all about standards, because in telco, mainly we are not using proprietary end devices, but the devices that are standardized. And changing from the terrestrial system to non-terrestrial system is a challenge now, but the big opportunity, because at the moment we are using like satellites telephone, which is the proprietary telephone. If we apply 5G standards to non-terrestrial system, every one of us using iPhones or Samsung telephone can connect to the access network to some MNOs with a COTS device, which costs you like $500 instead of $5,000. And this is big opportunity from the MNOs, from the infrastructure providers, because we can build infrastructure in the space that will be offering the coverage, the wireless coverage, 5G, 6G coverage to enterprises or to us, like the citizens. So 5G non-terrestrial systems are like the mobile networks, cellular networks that can cover certain areas with a standard. It means that we can connect our phones or other devices worldwide. And if this will be applied, it will be the first time in the history then the access network, that the end devices connected directly to the internet, to the servers, will be realized via satellite. Because so far we are doing like the backhaul connectivity or point-to-point connectivity, that we are taking the data, certain data from space to the ground. But having opportunity that we are in the middle of nowhere, and the same telephone that is using in the city center of Paris can connect to the satellite, it's a huge opportunity for all of us, and it's a huge opportunity not only for the telco industry but also for the space industry, because this is giving a certain bench of the customers to serve.
All right. So let's call it. Yeah, Anna, please.
I'd love to react to this because actually this range of discussion just brought us to a little bit to the maybe small conclusion that we are in space industry, but we are in reality in the information industry, because satellites are there, Earth observation satellites are there is to collect data, information for more informed decisions, and they could be for civil programs or they could be for military programs. But what the point that you just made, which is actually next technological challenge for the whole industry, is how to make this information more accessible or accessible much faster. And you can do it in two ways. I mean, they are not mutually exclusive at all. So one is you collect, you put more satellites into orbit, you collect data faster, or you have telecommunication networks that allow to relay data in a much more intelligent way to reach the right user at the right time. From the perspective of organizations such as the European Space Agency, we are right now working very actively to develop so-called integrated applications or have a systems architecture that would allow not only to make the sensing technology interoperable. That means satellites coming from public programs, commercial constellations, and maybe even the drone technology or high altitude platforms to work seamlessly, collect data in a way which responds to the user requirements, and at the same time have a communication layer that enables all that. And this is in fact a huge challenge because today, even though the sector has developed very fast, we know it's quite fragmented. So we have multiple actors providing their own solutions, scoping their own commercial opportunities with clients, be it government or private sector. But at the same time, we know that the final solution is it has much more value as a sum of its all than individual solutions being provided individually. And we believe that there is a role for organizations such as ESA through our programs, through the programs also of the European Commission to try to build this architecture for the future, where there is a role for everybody to provide their capability.
To this point, by design or not, sometimes the stack changes, right? And so we've seen this with software and with AI. I was at a talk yesterday and they said, well, clearly the 3-tier architecture that we all know is now 4 tiers because of models, right? So the idea of some either investments or disruptive capabilities changing the stack and then how we think about this. If we're using what we used to call service-oriented architecture or something modular like MOSA, with modern service delivery that has components that interact. We piloted with a company an MVNO, so a mobile virtual network operator that goes across MNOs. They're a VC-backed company called CAPE. We went there, we kicked the tires, and then we ended up having a lot of uses, and this blurs the stack. So I think there are opportunities out there across different portfolios that whether it's we try it and then it provides uses that we didn't even anticipate, or opportunities that we didn't anticipate, or something keeps maturing. This is something that I think we all have to watch.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Thank you for these comments. I think this sort of might serve as a common denominator for everything that you have said thus far. I think it's time is ripe to maybe recapitulate real briefly the highlights of these things you just said. Grzegorz, hybrid computing is coming, and quantum is basically not as far as many of us might think. Let me just maybe read me these, and then we'll dive again into discussion. But then Justin basically said, I love the phrase, security as a function of resilience. I think it's the way to think about this. Public-private partnerships, key to progress, right? Anna, strategic autonomy and technological sovereignty. Somehow I felt secure by hearing this, because it sort of taps into what I said initially, that we have to think for ourselves. We cannot really rely on foreign partners. Rafał, the role of the government in incentivizing things, right? It's key to everything, basically, because unless, and I think it happened so many times before, right, with different technologies, because there had to be that first push. there has to be a first time also the market takes it for real. And then last but least, David, you mentioned basically what I felt like the word you did not use, but it feels like encapsulates your thoughts: decentralization, right? That basically communication is now going to be more local, but yet more efficient. So these things you have mentioned, all of them, different themes, but at the same time, like Anna said, the question of the information industry sort of binds it all. Now, what I think might be of value to the audience is basically for you to lay out looking from where you stand, where the glass is half full, where it is half empty. What progress has been made in the industries that you are looking into on a daily basis, and do you feel like it's done and we can take it further, and where the progress is missing? And I think one question that we discussed earlier with Grzegorz concerns the potential of, let's say, mid-sized countries like Poland, for instance, to scale up. What can we do?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Yeah, actually, this question is combined of two points of view. The first one is what we can do with mid-sized countries, but specifically what we can do with Central European mid-sized countries, as Poland, for instance. There are a lot of challenges for small companies that would like to introduce technology, starting from, raising the capital at the beginning. As Creotech, we started in 2012, so it was like 12 years ago. And that time, no one in Poland actually was talking about space sector, nor the quantum sector. It was like a fairy tale from far, far away land. So basically, at first, there were actually no venture capital funds that were invested in Poland, and basically none of them was investing in high-risk technologies. It is changing now, of course, but then we had a real problem in developing in an ambitious area without almost money. Luckily, we found the Polish government, which have invested in Creotech in 2014. And since then, we are partially owned by the Polish state. So we overcome the first challenge. And then, of course, we had a huge challenge in finding a well-educated workforce. Now we are like 300 people. So in a country which, let's say 20 years ago, did not have a space sector at all, finding such a huge group of well-educated specialists was a difficult task. So what we did, we actually went to academia and proposed our own educational programs for young students. It's worked pretty well, so now we do not have a problem with finding new talents for the company, and also other companies in Poland are having the people from these programs. Then, of course, the biggest challenge was to find the first client for high tech, be it in space or in our quantum branch. Of course, Polish economy is much smaller and much weaker than German economy, and trying to conquer a stronger market starting from a weaker market is always a problem. Therefore, we had adopted a strategy of looking for our first partners among the international institutes and institutions in which Poland had a share. So our first client was actually European Space Agency, and then the second client was the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN. So with such renowned partners, we had no problem with finding more clients in the scientific community. So now we have like more or less 100 clients in this sector, including MIT, Berkeley, Oxford University, Polytechnic in Zurich, and many others in Europe, USA, Asia, and even Australia. So then the final challenge was to go really international. And, if you want to offer a high-tech product, especially coming from a mid-sized state, which is somehow behind such big states like USA or Germany, your first client should be in your country. Luckily, we found this client just December last year. We signed a contract with Polish MOD for a small constellation of observational satellites. It would be not possible a couple of years ago, but now the paradigm changed a lot because of the COVID and then the war in Ukraine. So just a couple of days after we signed the contract, we got a phone call from a private company that would also like to talk with us about similar constellation, let's say. So this is actually my point of view. So there were a lot of challenges, but one by one, not very fast, but progressing steadily forward, we managed to overcome them.
Thank you. Quick follow-up already, though. Is it correct if I say that you sort of went outside the country to forge this partnership with scientific institutions to look for expertise skills that Polish universities have not produced?
Oh yeah, definitely ESA is the source of the know-how that we now possess in Cryotech. It's extremely useful to work with European Space Agency, especially because apart from an order that they are sending to the company, they're also providing some specialists that are helping to prepare what is actually needed by ESA. So it's really a great organization.
Thank you. Justin, over to you. And what I've been thinking maybe as a starting point for this one would be perhaps what is the Navy's vision for integrating these different technologies that you work on? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like in the US there are these different well-funded parts of the government, whether in the military or in the civil sector, that receive these enormous amounts of funding to develop these cutting-edge technologies, but they somehow are all part of larger institutional architecture within a single state, that is the US, right? So I wonder, can you shed maybe some of your thoughts on that, and what do you think might be the takeaways that might be interesting for people coming, let's say, from Europe, as in this case?
Sure. So I teach a class called Hacking for Defense at one of the universities I mentioned. And an interesting thing there is we often find that breakthroughs are, as they say, like 10 overnight successes, 10 years in the making, right? And so there are private sector and public sector investments in all of these areas for a pretty long time before we find either the breakthrough or the commercialization piece. And so that kind of background, we're trying to, in general, as a society, as a country, and in general, shorten the time to that overnight. So can we be a overnight success 7 years in the making or 4 years in the making? So where we can accelerate that, we want to do that. So first and foremost, how do you get to the flywheel faster? So Horizon 1, here's what we're doing in execution. There are a number of different paths. Schrodinger actually came up with his equation like a couple miles away, and this relies on, within quantum, the multipath, what are all of the paths possible, right? And so if we are measuring value quantitatively, and we're saying what is the either military, mission, or business value here, and we're making aligned decisions based on that, it makes it much more of a data-driven discussion, and it allows you to leverage or piggyback, pull something from different services. And so I guess the answer to your question is for a given capability, if there is good research happening at a partner organization or an outside organization, and we are able to pull that from Horizon 3 into Horizon 2 faster, prove it out at an exercise or a pilot, and then pull that into Horizon 1. This is much more of a garden mentality. Historically, a lot of organizations have been carpenters, where if we see a problem, then we want to build something. Where you can adopt and adapt, it ends up going faster, and then the more from a standards perspective or interop perspective that we think about that holistically, you can't be perfect there, but the more that we're thinking about how we will interconnect, the more kind of n squared or 2 to the n options or opportunities become available. And so a more specific answer to the question is there's been I keep coming back to AI because it's a theme, and then it's hard to go 5 minutes without it. The opportunities that are available there are largely because of investments a lot of different places, but some companies, it's a K curve. Some companies are doing much better from a return on investment perspective than others, right? And so we hear numbers thrown around like 10% are really cashing in on this. And so how do you get better at that cashing in or that return on investment? If we're measuring value, then we can pursue activities that are higher value or providing returns, and then potentially like distribute from a portfolio perspective or cut the ones that aren't. And so I'd say like what maturity looks like. It's a technical discussion before it's a chronologically. It's a technical discussion like maturity before it's a commercial discussion. But the commercial part is like we have clearer signals there, and I would say one of the clearest signals right now is if we can use a disruptive capability to actually turn something off, or save money, or divest to reinvest, that's where we want to be. Just adding capabilities doesn't work that well with government budgets. There are valleys of death, there are other issues. And so we encourage all of our vendors and partners and nation partners and corporate partners, and we work with all companies from a lot of countries, if you can replace one or many capabilities with your capability as opposed to being additive, that's where we'd like to be. For a while there, the average cybersecurity stack had 73 products in it. A 74th rarely makes you more secure. But if you can add one and subtract 5 or 10, then potentially you can lower cost and add security, which should make you ultimately more resilient.
Great points indeed. I think ultimately what you just said boils down to the fact that at any given point in such a process, your reasoning has to be economically sound, right, and mature.
At any snapshot in time, you are, from a outcome-driven metrics perspective, either up or down on business outcomes and mission outcomes. There are times when you have to invest before you're getting return on investment, but none of these should be indefinite, and you should be progressing at some level if you're doing the right thing. And if we manage these types of activities like actual investments, not spends, and we look at historicals, then you can hone your craft and get much better at it.
Precisely. Well, on that note, Anna, I was thinking, the Copernicus program, it generates vast amounts of open access data, right? What is it exactly that ESA does in order to assure or make it so that that data is used as well as possible by those who have access to it to stimulate economic growth?
Right. We do quite a lot, but I wanted to refer to your great point, which basically described the process of innovation. And this is something which is something that we need to pursue, but this is also something that we need to accommodate in big public programs, which are not, in fact, not easy to achieve this kind of agility where you recognize the list of the capability and try to subtract the capability from a program. Almost impossible because there's so many vested interests, and these programs are designed in such a kind of long lifespan that you need to also secure funding for. And we operate on the scale of multi-annual funding. So basically, that is, in fact, happening in the Copernicus program. What we're doing is going through the process of this type of innovation. So we have achieved so far a great value for the money, I think, for the European and global community, because we have built the most important Earth observation infrastructure in the world. And we deliver this data on the free and open basis, which is extremely important for commercial opportunities as well. But at the same time, we've already planned this infrastructure for the next 12 years, meaning that by 2040, we'll have 6 new satellite missions, all of them funded through public programs. And right now, we are in the process to understand, okay, so how can we actually have an agile capability where we can add or subtract the capability, in fact, add mainly, because everybody wants to keep the program ongoing, but how we can add additional capability that will allow us to achieve the user needs in a way which also creates this opportunities for commercial industry to add their their sensors. And this is this actually sums up the role of ESA and public programs, which are not going to be anymore only to finance big public infrastructure, but also to become an enabler for commercial industry. And that's, I think, is the biggest opportunity for the future to achieve both cost savings, because the commercial industry is driven by a very specific requirements as well, meaning the value for the money and ability to compete to provide the best capability for the best price. But also fundamentally to keep the institutions, governmental institutions, relevant to economic development of the countries and regions, such as our European region.
Yes, that should be the role of a publicly funded international organization, right? Great. David, bottlenecks, challenges, things that you are facing in the industry, but that is only nascent, right? It's barely scratching the surface of the start line, and the finish line is far from the sight. What do you see? Like, what are the things that you feel like are the things that are going to be talked about in an industry, let's say, in this year?
So I think that definitely a telco will be joined with space this year, because even if we look at the 6G standard, so like 3GPP releases from 17 to 23, like 40% of 6G standard is focused on NTN networks, 6G and 5G NTN network. It means that this is extremely important, mainly from the different segments of the market, including also defense, because like 5 years ago, mobile private networks were started using in the enterprises, like media, logistics, manufacturing, where we were able to create independent wireless bubble to keep data secure, to give the customer independence, and to be able to, let's say, secure the performance of the networks, like latency, especially latency and throughput, because all telco responding to access to vast amount of data in real time, because all telco is about the real time stuff. So I think looking for the perspective of the standards and where big guys like veteran vendor suppliers are looking for, I think that this year will be very good, let's say, example of how two big industries can join together and work. And of course, this, let's say, cause a lot of challenges, because telco market do not understand space. There is a big gap in understanding. We can talk to Grzegorz or to Rafał about creating NTN systems, but they can look at me like, no, it's not possible, because satellite business, first of all, do not work like this. And second of all, it's not possible to attach your RAN stack on my satellites to offer the services to Africa, where there is a big need. So the biggest challenge will be to find appropriate partnerships and funding for these partnerships, because telco is was always focused so far on the customers like us, on the B2C, where it was the main revenue stream. They are selling the SIM cards and scaling. Then for like 4-5 years, they are trying to attach B2B market, which is extremely tough, but they need to have the revenue and invest. And telco is extremely competitive market. So the low margin fight with the pricing and all of this stuff. And who in telco finds the money to invest in these partnerships when the results will be in 2013, in like 5 years, 6 years from now? How to monetize this NTN system, which is the big opportunity, how to find the sources and partnerships. And this will be the biggest challenge to create such systems, to combine the two worlds, telco world with the space world, that requires a lot of capital.
Quite a challenge indeed, but given your enthusiasm, you're certainly up for the fight. So that's encouraging.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Rafał, over to you with one, I'm not sure if it's a provocative question, but one that I think is very relevant, as I assume, in your industry. it kind of also builds on what we've said before about building our, let's say, national or European capabilities, because we should have ours and not rely on others. Lifting satellites up there in order to have them in the orbit in the first place is in itself a challenge, right? And it's a very costly one, and there's a competition going on in terms of like who has the cheapest rockets, who has those that can retrieve them, so on and so forth. And so many questions that I'm sure I'm not aware of it, but you certainly are. I wonder, what is your take on this? Because, for instance, the press, at least, being so pessimistic as it usually is, only the headlines are telling that, you know, the Ariane program, that, you know, basically French, or I perhaps should say that out loud, but that's true, not least because the launching pad is actually not in Europe technically, but in South America. Anyways, it's belated, it's costly, it doesn't give us the edge. What do you think?
So look, I think that, and I will sort of answer the question and take this back to your starting point, which is what should countries like Poland do in order to develop capabilities which are relevant. The Ariane 6 program is definitely one that we should talk about, but it's not a lonely program from the perspective of the world, right? I think what we see as a trend, and this trend and launch is actually an excellent example of that, is that the old actors, the incumbents in defense, the way in which they have been operating stops being efficient when it comes to quick innovation. And the best example of that was when the ULA, so the United Launch Alliance, Boeing and Lockheed Martin, huge companies with all engineering capabilities in the world, were trying to launch rockets to bring the astronaut from the International Space Station. And they couldn't, right? And those guys were stuck up there until Elon decided to launch his own rocket and pick them up. And now what this showed is not as much as the fact that Elon is cool and Lockheed and Boeing aren't, but the fact that we are looking at a much broader global trend where those companies that have been established once for a certain purpose, and they have been operating with government in a certain way, which is very often cost and material procurement type, that those models, which aren't anymore product-based developments, they do not sustain innovation at the pace that the other models can. And we see the emergence of what used to be a bit of a taboo world, and nowadays it's not anymore a new defense tech, right? You see new companies, Palantir being a great example, Anduril in the United States being a great example, ICEYE, honestly, in Europe being a great example, because as much as our satellites are dual use, 95% of our revenue today is a government-based revenue used for security intelligence, right? Those new companies have proven that they can innovate at a pace which is substantially faster, and the products that they generate are much, much cheaper, right? And this is not, I feel like, unreal or unheard of. If we think about how the software industry has been changing, and we moved from a waterfall development model to an agile software development model, we saw exactly the same trend, right? The agile companies were able to develop their products so much faster, and we actually see the same thing when it comes to hardware. So rocket challenge is a big challenge. Europe is unfortunately a little bit behind. We have our own companies, you know, ISAR Aerospace in Germany, RFA, there is PLD Space in Spain, but they are nowhere near Starship that Elon is building, and we probably should be, you know, this is a matter for a whole new panel. How can we catch up? But what I will point out is launch is just one of those areas where we should really ask ourselves, how long can the old model of defense, big defense providers be sustainable? How long can we rely on Airbus and Leonardo as Europe? And how much we should start looking at investing right now in order not to be late for the rush at creating new companies that do it in a completely new way on a European scale, right? And I think if we realize that now is the time, we can probably build those companies in Europe that will catch up with Anduril and Palantir. And I'm looking a little bit with Anna over here because I hope that ESA will have a role in financing those developments over there. And I mean, you do already, but more is required, right? So I do think that it's what we see today is basically a beginning of a transformation of how defense companies are indeed operating, and a whole new set of entrants that will disrupt the previous model is really coming. And now, how should Poland position itself in this? I think it's important to start with the basic assumption which you mentioned. We should realize that we are a mid-sized country, and as such, we probably should not attempt to develop every single technology internally within Poland and conquer the whole world with it. right? It's probably not going to be even possible for the United States to by itself sustain development, because every single time you start a development of the technology, you need to have the internal financing, have an internal customer. You know, you've heard Gregor's story. It's not easy to have this money. And I've been being asked very often, you know, how much money would the Polish government have to spend in order to develop a rocket lab, right? And I said, look, it's no mystery. You just have to look at how much money Rocket Lab has raised. And that's a little bit over $1 billion, right? Do we have $1 billion to spend in order to develop Rocket Lab in Poland, right? And if we do, then what are we not going to do because we have spent $1 billion developing Rocket Lab, right? And it's not a thing which is uncommon, but I think especially the three of us over here kind of running our own companies will know that, you know, your primary thing in order to achieve efficiency is focus, right? And as a country, we've got to find our focus, which means we have to analyze the market, realize what are our strengths, what industry we already have in Poland that's in existence, and actually Earth observation is a strength of ours, and double down on that industry and find partnerships within Europe first and then globally in order to serve the rest of the things. And I think the faster we focus, the better, because if we double down on our industry, you know, it's not so easy for a country that hasn't been doing this to suddenly decide like, oh, okay, I'm also going to start building rockets, right? It actually takes a decade to get there, right? We already have put a decade, Grzegorz has put a decade in, I have put a decade in. We've got to double down on that and create a leader in European space focused on Earth observation. I truly believe that that's the path that we should be taking.
And maybe we should also add that the biggest data center, which is also a core for Copernicus program, is also in Warsaw. So all the data, petabytes of data and hundreds of petabytes of data that will be produced by these kinds of programs, public, also private, that's also Polish strength. But I have to say, I want to say one thing. Money is important. It's really important to have access to finance. But what is also important is talent. Because if you look at the history of Rocket Lab, of SpaceX, their initial investments were not so big. I mean, nobody would bet that these companies would succeed so much. Maybe even yours. Or yours. But what is also needed, and this is something that politicians and decision makers need to realize, is that you need to create an enabling environment for young people to take risks and be courageous in their decisions to pursue certain objectives. If you go, I went to very small anecdote. I went to see a Starship development base in out of Houston, in Starbase in Texas, just this spring. I went for holidays. I'm very interested in this topic. And I can tell you that there's a cohort of SpaceX engineers that live in a trailer park next to the development site. You would never think that this is the space where the top engineering talent would go and develop the most advanced rockets and most advanced technologies. It's not always about, it's also about inspiration, enabling capability, and actually letting people then later on scale up their business. And we are in this moment, and we can, with the right mindset and the right environment, institutional and private environment, accomplish these kinds of successes as well.
There's a saying, just on those beautiful contributions, that going after a 10x improvement is like just about as hard as going after a 50% improvement, right? But the return is much greater. And so I think there's a standing challenge that if you improve something by 20 or 30%, that seems significant. That's often not enough to change inertia or momentum in a market. And so bold bets, if you're looking backwards, are the thing that have moved the market more than anything else that I see. And one of the greatest asymmetries there is talent. So where there are bold bets that so speed matters more than it used to, value matters more than it used to, and so and intersections are where opportunities are. And so where you find that and folks are able to focus, there's nothing guaranteed in life, but this is where I think, at least looking backwards for the last few hundred years, like we've seen the biggest jumps.
Very valid points coming from meaningful and hands-on experience from all of you. So thank you for that. All good things come to an end eventually, and so our time is up. But as much as you'll certainly continue these discussions with the interested audience afterwards, it still wouldn't feel right if we didn't allow at least one quick question from the audience. So the question is, if there is a question. There isn't? Oh. Please.
Yeah, just it's maybe a little bit off topic, but what do you think we should do, like at the grassroots in Poland, to change the culture? So it's not just a culture of chasing the money and corporate jobs, but actually chasing dreams.
So, I think that there's not one thing that you should do. There's multiple of those, and because I know that what others will comment on, and we should of course allow systems to create sort of systems and institutions that will help you find the appropriate resources and so on. But I think the first and foremost thing that we in Poland may need to do is shows examples of success. You really want to create an environment of inspiration. That's something that the US has done extremely well, right? You have those examples walking and being visible everywhere of people that have developed something huge out of nothing. And they say, look, what I've done when I was young is I took risk, right? I took this bold move. I decided that I'm going to go for it. I didn't have anything to lose but a trailer in Texas. And, I went for it and it succeeded. And then there's going to be 5 other people that will say, I've also tried, I failed, but that's okay because I'm going to try it again, right? And I think the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves today in Poland is to show as many of those success examples as possible.
Yes, so example is one thing, and also the ecosystem around the innovation that helps us to scale the technology globally and to sales, because it costs. Business development and sales is a cost, and we need to have the ecosystem that will be able to squeeze the potential that we have in Poland to build the sales forces and business forces, because this is the main driver for the company. The revenue is the main driver of the company. We can have the best talents in the world here in Poland, but if the ecosystem won't be adjusted to scale the solution worldwide, we won't go anywhere. So the ecosystem is the second thing, and I think this is the good role of Polish diaspora with the successes. Like you, to show that it was possible, to show young people that it was possible to build a unicorn, the global company, that make the real impact to the world.
I would say that I get feedback from my colleagues from ESA who go to Poland for projects development. They are there to support technologies to grow, and they consistently tell me that they are very impressed by the companies and the communities and entrepreneurs that they meet. They also say that they did not expect the level of maturity and talent and let's say the advanced thinking for technology development. So I would say what we also need is build self-confidence, because I think Poland is in a great moment and still very hungry for success, and not a lot of countries can still say that.
So I do not have a wise advice, but basically we should wait. Things are changing. They are changing slowly, but it's going in a good direction. 10 years before, it was different, completely different world. Now we have an understanding of what innovation is. Now we have financing from venture capitals, from public sources, and it will be changing in the future also. So we are heading in a good direction.
Feedback. In electrical engineering, feedback is the number one thing. I think from a fuel perspective, mission is one of the best, if not the best fuel that exists. There's a book, Venture Meets Mission. They stood up kind of a talent organization for how to fuel and funnel in here. But if there is a needle with data that folks can move, when kids are using social media because they don't think they can move a needle, and there's like a larger collective goal and they can see the feedback on that, that allows, I think, some of the confidence and also kind of like opportunities to double down, to bloom along the way.
Wonderful. Well, then my very last request goes to the audience actually to join me in. Oh, there's a question.
Yes. Hi. So first of all, I'm not at all connected to the industry. I'm in the renewable energy business, but for the first time, I'm super impressed with what I'm seeing. So the question is, I think one of you, I believe, Creotech, you're partially owned by the Polish state. You are. I just looked you up. You just closed or recently closed a very good round.
Can you speak to the microphone, please?
Mixture of BlackRock, so superb investors. You should be. Tusk was today in Brussels, starting the first address of the Polish presidency. Yesterday, Trump stood with 3 CEOs, US/global companies, and basically bigged it up for $500 billion US dollars in an industry which kind of, to me, sounds pretty similar to what you're doing. So frankly, I don't know, since it's not a question, you should be up there in Brussels with Tusk or in Warsaw with Tusk and kind of being bigged up like this. I fully agree with what you said. And yeah, congratulations. I'm very, very impressed. And I hope Mr. Fanelli, you as acting CTO of the US Department of Navy can well, you're probably already feeding that back to the US, to our friends in the US, I hope. So thank you and congratulations. Very impressed.
No, we really wanted to be here with you today, guys. That's why.
Thank you.